Sometimes you do like a really banger post. It's like so good. And then you get like 100 impressions. And you're like, this algorithm, oh my
Yeah.
God. Best way to focus on who your best customers are. First of all, try and figure out who your anti-ideal customers are. A lot of times when I speak to businesses, they would say, Frank, if I'm in front of the customers, I will close like 30 to 50% of them. We did not have this stuff like large language models, chat GPT, AI,
Mm.
especially the ability to build something exciting was not there 11 years ago.
We are here live with the CEO and co-founder of Salesforge, Frank Saunders. Basically, what Salesforge does is that it blends AI and humans to maximize sales pipeline. And Frank, one of the things that I'm very, very impressed with you, please amend anything if I missed it, is that you went from 0 to 3 million ARR in 12 months. That's crazy. I'm
Thanks.
happy to
Yes.
have you.
Thanks for having me. Yes, this is actually the fastest yet in our category, meaning in our niche of because we have like hundreds of competitors, but like for the first year result of our business, 0 to 3, yes, it's the fastest in our category. Then at the same time, we have quite a few products as well. We build these what we call modular products, so where you have also multiple websites and apps, and then they're talking to each other nicely. It's a bit like an Apple ecosystem instead of just building one software. So yeah, we generate a bit of revenue from here, and there. And yeah, so apart from 3 million, we also grew to about 40 plus employees all around the world, predominantly Europe. Most of our customers are in the US though. And yeah, we typically serve sort of tech companies that need to aggressively scale, or like agencies that service a lot of companies. And then there's also a lot of also companies that believe in just in the world of making sure that their teams are very lean and mean. That means they have a team of salespeople, and then additionally they want to spin up agents. So have this sort of blended approach. And this is not just happening in the world of sales, but also we see something similar also happening in other parts of the business, for example, finance or HR, etc. You do see these sort of autonomous capabilities are coming in, and we just want to build this sort of one environment where humans and agents can coexist and actually work together nicely. So the blend is very important that these two things kind of coexist. And there's also other sort of regulatory constraints with anything to do with AI agents as well. So, for example, you can't use an agent to do a cold call, for example, or an AI agent can't do social selling or can't attend an event. That's why you will never be able to fully replace humans, but you are able to blend and essentially take out the maybe activities that the humans maybe are less good at. So, for example, writing maybe a good email or things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that like really attracted me also to your software or softwares is that you took like a modular approach to it. So you have like Salesforge, Mailforge, InfraForge,
Yes.
all these different forges. So maybe like for lack of better words on my end, like what was like the point of having different modules rather than having like just one all-in-one software?
Good question. So like I mentioned to you, we have like hundreds of competitors, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and then you typically look at all competitors and they all have just one big software. And we didn't want to be like all the other guys, one big software. And we knew that we're going to build a lot of good stuff. So if you're going to build a lot of good stuff and you're going to build it into one single software, then what will happen after 5 to 10 years, you'll become something like Salesforce, where there's just so much that's in there, in a single software, where you're sort of barely using like 10 to 20% of all the stuff in that software. So we didn't want to become that sort of a software. If we believe that there's something that's big enough of a component, then it should live in a separate sort of environment or software. And maybe that's a disadvantage, if not everything is in one place. But there's also advantages. So on one hand, all these sort of softwares are essentially like entry points in our ecosystem. So again, if you think about Apple, right? So you get an iPhone, and suddenly in the Apple ecosystem, you have the Apple ID, and you may think of buying a Mac, or whatever other products that iPhone has, right? So there's also the ability sort of to buy this one single product and then go and expand to this other product and other product. And then you suddenly are in this sort of ecosystem of tools where you also have this sort of benefit of kind of seeing that everything is nicely integrated. But also the other idea that we always thought is like only to buy really what you need. So if you need only, so we have say 7 softwares, right? So if you need only 3 capabilities or 3 softwares out of 7, you only buy these 3 softwares, and that's it. So you never feel like you're overpaying. So you only paying what you really need. And sometimes people just buy one thing, and that's totally fine. And if this one thing would exist in the biggest software, they would never buy our biggest software. So yeah, on one hand, we want to be just different to every other competitor. So that's why we decided to build modularly. So whenever we're speaking to a customer and they'll say, hey, Frank, I'm not really sure whether you're better or whatever, but one thing that we can say is the way that we're different, we're modular. And some people really love the modular stuff. And some other people like what we call the super app, like one app approach. And I would say there's no right and wrong. Essentially, both approaches have the advantages and disadvantages. But when you have hundreds of competitors, something has to make you different. So from a product standpoint, from a pricing standpoint. So on one hand, the pricing standpoint, so I'm going to give you an example there as well. So a lot of the legacy softwares have been always typically charging per seat as a pricing model, because typically when the companies grow, then they used to have more and more headcount. So it kind of makes sense to charge per seat. But that's not the case anymore today. A lot of companies are actually becoming leaner and meaner. Some companies are actually reducing headcount. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the, let's call it the activity or is being done more in the software side of things, by the agents, etc. So what makes sense to do today is you may have it exactly the same software with the same feature sets, but because you're going to have a different pricing model, you can massively, massively scale. So we have seen that in our category as well, but also in other categories where suddenly from a seat-based pricing, you have usage-based pricing. And then some companies even go crazier where they would do outcome-based pricing. So only if this thing happens, we're going to charge you something. So things are massively evolving, and I think more and more sort of processing of something like sales, etc., is being shifted towards software and to the agents, and that's also the blend that we sort of see as well.
And do you find like one is better than the other, or does it just depend per case, per situation?
Good question. So I would say the bigger the total addressable market that the company has, so we typically say there has to be some sort of threshold. So I would say if you have at least 3,000 companies that you're looking to reach out to, then you have to think about systems and agents and scale. And there's a lot of what is called scaling problems that businesses then have, And some businesses, total addressable market, of like hundreds of thousands of businesses that they want to reach out to. So like a huge, huge total addressable market. So whenever you go build, so this is where system thinking, automation, this is where you need all that stuff. But if it's below 3,000 companies that you're looking to reach out to, then this is where you want to be doing, you don't need all that software. It's also going to become too expensive. You may as well, have really good sales reps and let them, do manual dialing, manually reaching out to people via email, etc. So yes, so the sweet spot for what we do is when you have a very big TAM. If you have a very small TAM, or you're like let's say in enterprise sales, then you're like what we call the anti-ICP, the anti-ideal customer profile, right? So I always sometimes say, the best way to focus on who your best customers are, first of all, try and figure out who your anti-ideal customers are, right? So, and that will put you on a good path in terms of building the right product, reaching out to the right people, and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Yeah, because that's interesting, because it's usually like the other, at least I've been told like the other way, at least, so like just nail down exactly who your person is, rather than saying like who isn't. Because it even goes like with the modular approach. Even was there a specific modular that was selling the most, that was selling the most at the beginning, and you were like, let's just keep building like some features that can kind of be attached to it, kind of like a Lego piece.
Good question. So we always were thinking about building a lot of software just generally from the very beginning. So we started with the core product, the flagship product called Salesforge, which executes essentially emails and LinkedIn messages at scale. But then what happened was back then, so we launched like 2.5 years ago, we understood that something was blocking us actually to onboard customers. And we had to do this manually for a fair bit. And then we understood that the pain is so frequent and it's so big that it made us essentially pause the development of software 1 and move over to software 2 already. So there was literally, when we launched, we acquired 100 customers in the first 3 months. But then we understood that like we're not going to see this sort of hockey stick growth where it's just going wild, And that's because we didn't have this what's called the infrastructure layer. So the infrastructure layer means you typically should not be sending any form of sort of cold emails from your primary business domain, because you're putting it at risk of being spam blocked, blacklisted, whatever you name it, right? So you need to set up this sort of permutation, so multiple these additional domains. Like, so if you have the domain like Salesforge.ai, would set up try Salesforge.ai, get Salesforge.ai, and so on and so forth, right? So we were setting this up for customers manually to make sure we're protecting their domain. And then we understood that, damn, we need to automate this whole thing. It's just too painful to do this manually. And there's a huge definitely opportunity because people always need to do this. It's like this is a thing that you always have to do. And so we started building a second software after 3 months. And it took us a couple months or so. And then we rolled out the second software. And then once we had the second software, then the sales massively. So that's when we started to see the hockey stick growth. So we started to generate a lot of revenue from the second software, and the revenue from the first software also went up. And today, we just look at our revenue like in a Google spreadsheet essentially, where you can see for every single one of the products, what is the revenue, what is the retention, all that stuff. So that's how we look at our business today. But yeah, kind of the push came really from speaking to our customers on a daily basis, understanding what's blocking them to kind of progress to the next step. Where are they failing? Because if we're building something, it has to be definitely built for the same user, for the same buyer, but it solves an additional pain point when it comes to actually generating these meetings. So yeah.
And with this too, with software, sometimes there's like a point of churn as well, Lucy.
Yeah.
And do you typically have any measurable like ROI that you're saying, specifically if it hits these KPIs, then very likely it decreases the churn? Like how is that specifically for the LinkedIn? How is that for the emails?
So people typically would just churn in our space. So in our space, typically, if you're targeting SMB customers or mid-market customers, essentially, let's say you're up to 200 employees or so. If you're targeting these sort of companies, and they would, let's say, they would try out software, just like they would try maybe running Google Ads campaigns. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, what they're looking for is if they spend the money, any money really, they're looking to get any form of return. So any form of return means if I at least have booked like 1-2 meetings, there's something there, right, for them. In a lot of cases, when customers come to us, a lot of them are very early stage companies or where they don't have a product market fit, or like maybe later stage companies, but they have
Mm.
never sent actually emails to their potential customers. So they don't have what's called a product channel fit. But the easiest way to figure out whether, email could be even a channel for you is like just ask yourself, have you sent out an email to another business and you are able to get to a particular conversion, which is, I booked a meeting with them or they attended my webinar or like something happened. If you are able to do that manually, on your own, then great. We would just scale the same activity up, to the same audience. We'll find more audience, etc. So it should work at scale. But people, come to us where they have never sent any emails, or they would say, "It when I was doing it, it didn't work for me." So why would you think that when you're going to automate, this would suddenly work for you? So there's definitely that means that's why there's a lot of churn, because people come and test and see if it works or not. And for some people, it doesn't work, so they churn. But if people are able to book at least 1 or 2 meetings a month, they feel that they want to keep paying, especially because most of our customers will pay anywhere between $100 to $200 a month. So it's not a lot. I mean, because we are targeting small businesses. So a lot of these people are happy to keep paying, but some of them are like, okay, well, if I didn't give even a single meeting, then I'm gonna churn, right? So in our space, you would typically see churn rates of 5 to 10% on a monthly basis. That means 5 to 10% of your book of business just suddenly disappear. So you'll be dead essentially, after a year or so. And this is why typically companies in our space, they acquire aggressively more customers, right? So to compensate for the churn, and they would just try and acquire more of the customers that would actually see success, from the channel. Because once you see the success from the channel, you want to use it like forever, really. The good thing about cold emails as a channel or LinkedIn as a channel, it's not that expensive versus say something like super expensive like Google Ads channel, to acquire customers.
Yeah.
And it is scalable as well, because there are some forms of acquisition or channels that sure you can launch a campaign, but it has like an end date, and that's it. Like you can't even scale it, but you can definitely run it as a campaign. But something like cold email or sending messages on LinkedIn or even doing cold calling, it's something that you could just keep on doing for the next decade or two comfortably, right? Yeah. So there's that consistency, etc. But yeah, like 1 or 2 meetings a month, if you have that, people retain. But I can tell you a lot of people don't even get 1 or 2 meetings a month because they either don't know sometimes, what's the best audience to target, or what should be in my email copy, or they just have sometimes, I speak to people, I open the website and the website is just ugly. I mean, it's so ugly. And I would not do business with them. Just looking at the website, then they're like a nobody on social media, for example, right? Doesn't matter whether it's LinkedIn or Insta, wherever it is that you are. But if you have a great website and if you have a presence on, let's say in our case on LinkedIn, guess what? When we reach out to somebody on LinkedIn or an email, people may have heard about me, or about our brand, etc. So as a result, your performance is much, much higher when you have this sort of web presence. So people don't understand that, when it comes to reaching out to other people, well, have you warmed up your audience, over the months, quarters, years, and then you hit them, with a message, that's how it should be, that's how it typically works, not just, sending out of, bunch of messages and just so hoping for the best. It may work if you're selling something that everybody needs and you have no competition, but I would say majority of businesses out there have some form of competition. Yeah, and then some businesses I would say that don't do well at all in our space would be something that's very much a commodity. So for example, that would be SEO services. So somebody reach out to me and about SEO stuff or custom development, so web development shops, and stuff like that. So because there's like so many of them, like tens of thousands of these sort of agencies or companies that do that, and they're reaching out with the same exactly nearly copy. Hey, do you
Yeah.
need some engineers? And it's the same stuff, nothing that makes them unique. And then they wonder why it doesn't work. And I'm sure, I bet there are companies that need help on the tech front with engineers, etc. But if you are facing, a very much of what I call a red ocean, so there's a lot of competition, you have to niche down, on to an area where you're sort of specializing maybe a bit more, or maybe your engineers are specializing whatever in that specific area. As a result, because you are specializing in that area, you can drive more value for that segment of businesses. And then you reach out saying, we specialize in this area. So they are then far more likely to respond back to you and actually buy from you. Because, if you are catering for everybody out there, I'm doing SEO services for anybody, then at the same time, it's, you're not really specializing on any segment. So like, we would not want to do business with you if you do SEO services. But if there's an agency that would reach out to me and say, Frank, we are an agency for B2B SaaS SEO, and we only do B2B SaaS SEO. And we work with similar companies to you, XYZ, also B2B SaaS, in adjacent category, or maybe they're a competitor, whatever that is, right? I'm more likely to respond back, even though there's so many, agencies that do SEO. So that's an example of where you have to pick your niche, and through your niche, you drive down. That's how you would acquire customers. But people struggle to understand as to how the brains of their, users or potential customers actually works when it comes to actually doing business with them. So yeah.
And I'm really excited to jump into this part with LinkedIn and cold outreach. But just one quick question before jumping into this. You said that the 1 to 2 meetings, like how much is their like average contract value that they're like lucky to be booking like 1 to 2 meetings? It seems so low per month.
Yes, it is low. So on average, I would say when somebody is selling something through us, it goes into, it's anywhere between $1,000 to $10,000, somewhere in that range, I would say, right? So, and let's say on average is like, let's say 5K. So I'm reaching out to a X audience and I'm selling something that's on average 5K. And if I'm getting 2 opportunities and each is 5K, and if I'm able to close 1 and 2, that means I generate 5K. So I paid Frank, let's say $200, and I generated a 5K deal. I'm happy. Like, see, that's how, yes, the deal size have to be kind of, relatively decent, but it typically goes into thousands of dollars. But like, if you have a, okay, sort of what's called close rate, post, from meeting to actually to getting the money, then that's where people feel happy. So a lot of times when I speak to businesses, they would say, Frank, if I'm in front of the customers, I will close like 30 to 50% of them. Great. So that means I have a very good close rate. They just struggle to get actually these people into a meeting. Maybe they were just doing a lot of low volume, which is why they generate, so few meetings. Then they feel happy. But I always say, let's say you have a goal, and the goal is I want to generate 20 meetings on a monthly basis, right? You need to do what's called backwards analysis. Like, if I need to generate 20 meetings, I need to know, okay, how many meetings have to be, let's say I want to generate maybe not 20 meetings, let's say 10 customers. I want to generate 10 customers. How many meetings do I need to have on a monthly basis to actually, acquire 10 new customers? And then to get these 10 meetings, what do I need to do, at the top of the funnel, from perspective of sending an email, advertising, doing something else, to get to my goal? And guess what? A lot of people don't actually do that math. They don't understand how much activity they need to do at the top of the funnel to arrive to the result that they want to arrive to. Yeah, but it's actually, the math is very simple. There's only a kind of few steps in the funnel, and you can just calculate, on Google, whatever, and what does it actually take.
Okay.
So yeah, and then so when they would say, oh, you generated for me, 1 to 5 meetings on a monthly basis. But what I find that is an average business. So let's say we just take one channel. Let's say cold email as a channel. So I'm a business, I'm a service provider, whatever, and I'm selling something. Maybe it's worth, I don't know, let's say 5K on average. Where people feel like they're doing enough of activity today, they have some sort of, it's called North Star. If I'm doing this amount of activity, I'm going to see a lot of meetings. And that's typically, they would say 1,000 emails a day. And that's how many emails you actually have to send, even good emails to a good audience. So because of the conversion rates, meaning you're probably going to see 2 to 5% reply rate, typically, from emails. And then from the reply rates, so let's say you got 10 replies back from your prospects. If you're generating 1 to 2 positive replies from that, that is what's classified good. Because actually 80%, at least 80% of people typically will say no to your offer, if they respond back. So that means if you are able to make 2 out of 10 say yes, that means things are working, actually. That means you have something that people are, they want. And then the thing becomes, if you're looking to get more positive replies, more meetings booked, the only way is to scale. And the reason why you scale is because not everybody's in market for what it is that you're selling. So one of the things that you can not really figure out is really what's called the timing, or when's the best time to reach out to my ideal prospects, and which is why then suddenly you need to reach out to a lot of people. as a result. And it doesn't matter how many sort of, there's a lot of sort of what's called signal-based data or intent-based data on the internet. It doesn't matter how much you use of that, it helps a bit, but still understanding when's the best time to reach out to somebody in my market, it's very, very tricky. And I would say the best thing to do there is to reach out to that individual, right? Let's say I reach out to you today, Jordan. I would reach out to you today and I'll send you maybe a second email next week. And if you don't respond back to me, which is fine, you're still my ideal customer. And maybe if you didn't opt out, I'll be back, gonna knock on your doors again after a quarter. And this is what's called best practice. So if you're looking to maximize the amount of meetings or customers from your market throughout a year, you should knock on their doors 4 times a year. And that's what I've found to be the best strategy. So that's what we do. So as well.
Oh, that's actually really interesting because I think a lot of people, they're like, and myself included too, I'm like, okay, if they really wanted to buy something, they would have just like bought something from me from like the third time. Now I feel like I'm annoying them. So maybe like spacing it out as well would be ideal too. The part that I'm very, very excited to ask you about is LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. I sent you a video
Yeah.
DM back in the day, and I've been experimenting too with LinkedIn, what works and what doesn't, and even like nailing down on my ICP. And before I get into I don't even know if I want to get into my stuff, but so why LinkedIn and how did you choose LinkedIn and what's going on with LinkedIn on your end?
So just like on email, you need a certain scale. You also need a certain scale on LinkedIn. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is that LinkedIn is not meant to scale, right? So you can't just suddenly send out a lot of connection requests to a lot of people from your own single profile. So it's kind of similar also to email. You just can't send too many emails from a single domain because you'll burn your domain eventually. And this is why there's the only way to really to reach out if you have a huge total addressable market, you need to do what's called horizontal scaling. Horizontal scaling means just like an email, you have multiple domains, multiple email accounts, and that's essentially your infrastructure to scale. Something similar is something that you need to do also on LinkedIn. So that means you need to have multiple LinkedIn profiles. And this is not a copy of your own profile. These are essentially your team. So in our company, we have 40 plus employees, and I have the ability to connect essentially about 30 LinkedIn profiles. So it's literally a pool of profiles essentially that we can then use to reach out to our ideal customer. And yes, some of these individuals are like working in support. Somebody's a content manager, right? So they don't work in sales as per se, right? But you're using their profile to reach to your ideal customer at scale, essentially. So because we have millions of businesses that we can reach out, right? So we need the ability not just to scale on email, but also on LinkedIn. There's 2 ways generally how you approach. Doesn't matter what channel that is. On one hand, you can do what's called the spearhead approach, and that's what you do, Jordan. You would have this ideal customer in mind, and there's maybe a certain size, though, and it's not too big, right? And you can do a lot more activity let's call lead, right? Or per individual that you're looking to reach out to. And you got a lot more different touch points, and you can also shoot a video, etc., right? Which takes time, etc. And the other way to approach your market is what's called the widened approach. So because you don't really know, in your huge total addressable market, who is in market for your product, well, you will need to cast a wider net, on your market. So you need to figure out how to scale that. And so the only way to scale that from the widened approach standpoint, you need to, when you are doing the outreach, you need multiple profiles to do that on LinkedIn. So one of the strategies that we do that works actually pretty well is reaching out actually to the followers of our competitors. So that's the data that we provide also in one of our softwares called Salesforge. So imagine I have hundreds of competitors and I would just pick one of them, right? And the one competitor where my data in my CRM has shown that we win against them pretty well, right? We have very high conversion rate when we go up against them. Whether we are better, cheaper, faster, whatever the reason is, we are winning against that particular competitor. So what you want to do is you want to identify more of those accounts or customers, right, of the competitor. So there's few ways to do that. One is you can look at sort of review sites, let's say on G2 or Capterra or on even Google Maps, etc., right? And you can try and figure out, who are the customers potentially of that business. But the other way is that you can extract just the followers, who's following that particular brand, or say on LinkedIn. And then you can just make some assumptions that after you do a bit of filtering, in terms of geographies, titles, etc., that these are potentially customers of my competitor. So then when we doing the outreach, we believe that they are what's called problem and solution aware. And we just need to figure out what will make them actually switch over to us. So as I said, we have a superior product, cheaper product, whatever that is. And that's, for example, a strategy that's working really well for us because we have so many competitors. So then we can build out, a campaign for a specific competitor and then go up against them. We don't even need to use, in that case, even AI, because we know that they're problem solution aware. We know that potentially they are using a competitor. So then our copy, even though it's written by a human for every single one of the individuals, has far, far higher performance than, let's say, you targeting just simply, let's call it founders, because I would always say anything is better than pulling sort of pulling sort of a list of people, like they're CEOs of tech companies, anything else is better. So it's much better, say, for example, targeting followers of competitors, or there's some sort of intent signal, et cetera, and stuff like that. So that's what we do. There's also companies what I call are in red ocean with lots of competitors, and then there's companies that are what's called in blue ocean that have barely any competitors. So depending on what sort of market you're in, your strategy will vary on LinkedIn versus email versus calling, etc. But the other thing that needs to happen, actually, apart from us reaching out, we also need to make sure we're sort of warming up our audience before we would reach out as well.
Yeah.
So we would definitely connect with a lot of these individuals, and we would start doing quite a lot of content on LinkedIn, but also not that content that's kind of generic, but also memorable. So if you go to my LinkedIn profile today and you look at my features section, there are some videos, etc., or some pieces of content that went viral a fair bit. And you need to be sort of creative. What will resonate with your audience? So when it resonates, right, you very well, and you're doing essentially what I would describe edutainment. So you are not just educating your audience, but you're also entertaining them. And that's exactly what you need to do if you're looking to go viral and have a good recall on your name and your brand. Even my emoji that I have next to my name. So there's a bacon emoji next to my name, and it comes from the saying in the US, bringing home the bacon, right? Because we're selling to a lot of people in the US. And so if you're on a typical sales team in the US, you will typically hear something like, hey, let's bring home the bacon, So it's a slang, that we are sort of, latched on. Yeah, so like even having an emoji is like super important. So it's sort of these things that we do to naturally warm up the audience, and you have to be consistent on LinkedIn. That means on a daily basis, Monday to Friday at least, you have to put something out. I think this is also the challenge. What is it that you want to put out? And what I find is, like you just need to share what you're doing in your life. And some posts could be about your product or whatever. There's something that you launched, but just make sure that what you're doing is, I call that, LinkedIn feed domination. Essentially, you are always posting, and so that means if you are always having a good chance on a daily basis to appear on the feed of your ideal customers. It's like free advertising, because it generates thousands and thousands of impressions every single day. And the alternative would be you spending money on LinkedIn advertising, instead, right? And people are more likely to buy from you from the organic content that goes out rather than the ads, right? Because people do have a bit of what's called an ad fatigue. Ads definitely can work, but I think the main, at least on LinkedIn, and there's also another platform, the main bulk of sort of activity or content or impressions that you're generating in front of your potential customers has to come from organic content. So yeah.
And one of the things too, or the main thing that you were mentioning, is that it's good to scale when you have like multiple accounts.
Yes.
But at the same time, isn't there, especially when it's like founder-led marketing, isn't there one that like converts the most out of all of them if you have somebody like at the army, I guess?
Sure. Yeah. So you can see statistics like, okay, so we have 3 co-founders, right? So 3 co-founders are reaching out. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, they have maybe 5. So essentially, they don't have that much of a higher acceptance rate, the 3 of us. I would say, let's say like 5 to 10%. So let's say, you know, 50 to 55% is the acceptance rate for the founders. But then the rest of the folks, they have, let's say, 35 to 45% acceptance rate. It's not actually that, the delta is not that big, if I'm very honest. But it's not like, every person in your company can be a co-founder and a CEO, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, sure, you can optimize it. You can use the founder accounts or the CEO's accounts or my account to only reach out to the right people. But the thing is, like, we don't just do outreach, and we don't just reach out. We don't just do content. We also what we do is you have the ability on the website, for example, to de-anonymize who is on your site, like right now on the pricing page or on another high intent page as well right now. So we use a company called Vector. You can try them out. It's also free. And that gives you the ability to essentially extract who is on your site and then reach out to them pretty much immediately within 10 minutes on LinkedIn. saying, I was wondering, like don't be creepy. You could just say something like, I was wondering if you're right now in the market for Agent Franks, or sorry, for an AI agent or AI SDR or something, or
Mm.
whatever they were, right? So you're trying to connect to that particular space. But don't say, hey, I saw that you were on my site and you're reaching out to them. But it actually did happen actually with one company, but they were selling this data. So it kind of made sense. So I got an email literally within 10 minutes of visiting their website, So
Oh,
it's quite
wow.
impressive. But then you don't do that in typical case. So what I typically recommend is if you can identify the business and also the individual who is on your site, yeah, just fire off, a LinkedIn message, also an email additionally, to try and kind of, bring them kind of further down the funnel, right? So that's also the places where you would sort of use the founder profile. But there's other things that you would do around events where you could use the founder profile. Like there's so many sort of use cases, I would say, of what you can do with LinkedIn, like at least like 10 or so, right? Where what you could do with that. I also, for example, use my following to invite them to a particular LinkedIn event. So we would organize, maybe 1 or 2 LinkedIn events on a monthly basis, just to make sure we have good air cover, essentially, in terms of like we actually do events online. We would invite people. But in my case, what you can do on a weekly basis, let's say we create an event in 4 weeks' time. Every week, an individual LinkedIn profile can invite up to 1,000 individuals to that LinkedIn event. And that's something you can do. So because I have over 30K followers and connections, I can then, from my 30K, not everybody's ideal customer, but let's say if everybody's ideal customer, then I can pick the right ideal customers, I guess, and invite them to the event. And if it's in 4 weeks' time, that means I can invite up to 4,000 people to that LinkedIn event. So that's how. So that's there's not advantage of having good following and then being able to invite these individuals to a webinar to talk about a specific pain point, or a specific thing that you think it will resonate. So the webinar, for example, we ran a webinar today early on, and we had over 200 people signing up, and I think about 100 people attended, which is pretty okay, especially for our sort of consistency in terms of how many events we do. So yeah.
And sorry, even with for LinkedIn, in terms of like specific aspects, in terms of connection, DMs, posting, is there
Yeah.
one that you find to be like more of a powerhouse within one? You need all three of them combined in some certain way, or how do you work with those three aspects of LinkedIn?
So you definitely need to push out content Monday to Friday, one post a day, typically
Or
about 8,
importance, maybe I
9
should
p.m.
say.
Was that?
Or sorry, maybe like if I could have rephrased it a little bit
Yeah.
more, but if it was like the importance of them, if you were to say like if you're not doing anything else, like just do
Good
this,
question.
prioritize it per day.
I would say it's a tricky one to answer, if I'm very honest, because it's very hard to evaluate the importance, I think, of
Mm-hmm.
because it feels like you need to do these 2 or 3 activities at all time that yield this, exponential value to a business in terms of, building,
Mm-hmm.
pipeline, brand authority, etc. Because yeah, on one hand, I could just, push out content all day long, just do that, and people would reach out to me. But I'm a big believer not just doing what we call inbound, meaning build content, push it out, but also reach out to people as well at the same time, right? Because I believe, from both angles, if you're doing the outreach on LinkedIn or if you are posting content, you will see results. I think maybe if I had to choose, I'm probably more lenient towards the outreach piece because when you're doing outreach, at least, and if you do it well, actually, I mean, there's a bit of caveat. If you do really good outreach, it is predictable, actually. Whereas with content on LinkedIn, what you'll find is because of the LinkedIn's algorithms, sometimes you do like a really banger post. It's like so good. And then you get like 100 impressions. And you're like, this algorithm, oh my
Yeah,
God. Actually, the best thing you can do is you can delete the post and just repost it again, actually. Just a quick hack. Just literally delete it. Even if there's some engagement, just delete it and post it again, and it will go. Typically, it went well for me the second time. So sometimes the algorithm for some reason hated the initial post. I don't know, but
it's like a
there's
time
definitely
frame thing.
yeah, it could be. I don't know. So sometimes you just don't know. Like you don't know how the algorithms really work. Back in the days, you were assuming that videos were very good on the feed. Actually, the videos are not performing really well on the feed at all right now. What I find is that just an image performs like really well right now on the feed, and
Yeah.
then but it changes. Quite let's call it quite frequently. That you may need to again swap from an image to having a video, maybe a carousel post, whatever. We are definitely testing it. All the time trying to see what works. But at the end of the day, it's not about I wouldn't say it's about, let's just do maximum possible engagement. Let's have maximum possible reach at all times. No, at the end of the day, whatever you're doing on LinkedIn, there has to be some sort of business value, that you're getting out of it, right? So, and sometimes posts that are really poor in terms of engagement actually generate a lot of opportunities. It's just that maybe that particular post where you talk about a specific area doesn't resonate with everybody, but resonate
Yeah.
with specifically your ideal customer. And even though it doesn't have a lot of engagement, it suddenly generates for you 3 meetings out of this one post. But I typically would say you need to combine, posts that where you're not going to have a lot of engagement but are super valuable for your ideal customer versus posts that have the ability to go viral. If you want to engineer sort of virality, I mean, what people do, at least in our segment, quite a bit, so we've been also testing that a bit, is doing what's called a lead magnet. So you can read about how to do a lead magnet and then do a lead magnet so good that it has a good chance to go viral. That means a lot of people want to get a lead magnet, etc. So there's definitely ways to do that, and that's how you sort of engineer virality into your post. But if you're looking up to, I guess, people that do really well content on LinkedIn, one of the individuals would be Adam Robinson. He runs a company
Yeah.
called RBTV, and he's just always, on
Mhm.
LinkedIn, always talks about how he runs his company just with 3 people, etc. He's very good on the marketing front, just generally as an individual, and he's very charismatic. A lot of his content, by the way, is very marketing it. Don't always trust what he says, by the way. When he says he runs a company with 3 people on his company, it's actually not fully true because there's a lot of agencies also behind the scenes as well. So, but the way that he does that, you can definitely learn quite a few things, at least 100 things, I think, from the way he does that. And then he runs webinars, etc. So he's very good on that front. I wish he was my head of growth or something, So, but yeah, definitely you can learn these little things from different people because people, a lot of people on LinkedIn get a lot of engagement, but they have very different sort of strategies about how they go about things and what are they known for, and so on and so forth. So my goal is just to be known for all things sales and specifically generating demand for the business, meaning I do outreach really well and I generate meetings, and that's what I'm trying to build in terms of authority and domain expertise in the space. I don't want to be known anything to do with other spaces, right? Because you're then diluting as to what people perceive you, right? So you need to talk about
Mhm.
consistently about the same things, even though I am a father of two and I do these other things and I also like that, but I never post about this because that will dilute a bit more the perception of who you are. And sure, you want to tell people who you are behind the scenes and what your family is, but the way I look at stuff is that LinkedIn is not Facebook, it's not Insta, etc. Just share stuff with people that you believe intrinsically will help them in their business, in one way or the other. And if you have learned at least one thing from my post, I feel good about it. And same, attending an event or you look at the LinkedIn post, you have to be able to learn at least something.
And the two questions to wrap it up, it's that like I came from video, I came from like Instagram doing video reels, and I know that, and correct me if I'm wrong here as well, your team is also posting a lot on TikTok with its
It used to
virality.
actually, yeah. Happy to chat about that. It
Yeah,
used to, yes. Mhm.
yeah, but I really love video, and that's also why I sent you like the video, because
Mhm.
I saw that it was working, and I love that video is like a way that people can like know who you are, who you talk, your
Yes.
mannerisms, and it translates so much better than text. Like texts are good, and like people obviously follow blogs, and people have gotten very popular through blogs. But
Yes.
even though LinkedIn doesn't like, I've never really seen like a viral video. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen a viral video on LinkedIn. I still post them out there because I think that people still need to like kind of it like equates people better with like who I am and how I speak. Do you think that video first is like still here to stay on LinkedIn? And
Yes, it
yeah, and then
is.
what did you
Mhm.
do on TikTok as well?
Yeah, so let's start with LinkedIn. So definitely video and LinkedIn works really well. So meaning
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn native. It's not a YouTube video, nothing like that. You are
Mm-hmm.
literally natively uploading that into the LinkedIn Messenger and you're firing that off. And the top, let's call it, elite salespeople or the elite of the elite always do videos. Actually, what I find, even though it's easier to consume text, a quick video, like it has to be quick. It can't be longer than even 1 minute. Ideally, it's less than 30 seconds because if you're sending videos to very important people, they don't have time. They'll give you 5 to 10 seconds. They may watch a video. So the first 5 10 seconds matter a lot. And a video is a pattern interrupt, generally speaking. And typically, whenever you see that there's a video that's embedded into LinkedIn Messenger, you assume it's authentic by default, right? So people are curious what's in the video. It's similar to a voice note as well, which is another thing that you can try, sending people over to. And yes, it does work. I think where where people get, sort of demotivated to do, videos on LinkedIn is naturally when a person doesn't respond back, because
Mm.
it does take a bit of time to do a good video. Sometimes you didn't do it really well. You want to refilm it, whatever, and shoot it again. And then when the person doesn't respond back to you, then let's say you're in sales, you are getting demotivated pretty fast. But the elite people, they don't get demotivated. So I know some people that are very elite in sales, and one of the things that they do is, yes, they do send videos on the messenger, and they do it as a cadence every day. They would do 20 to 30 videos, and it's just something that they do. It's
Mm.
not scripted, nothing like that. Very natural. Sometimes on the go. Sometimes they're sitting around, but they want to reach out to this person and they want to impress them. They want to have the good first impression, and they want to say hi, and they want to say, this is the problem I solve. The reason why I reached out to you, I believe you have this problem because I observed X, Y, Z. And yes, it can work. It's just that you're spending more time, per individual to reach out. So these have to be quite sizable, engagements, or opportunities for you to do this, right? So, but what we will see in the future, just to, I guess, to prepare for everybody, we will see on LinkedIn what's called deep fakes. And a deep fake essentially means I will be able to take Jordan's picture on LinkedIn, and I will make Jordan say and do things in the camera without Jordan having to ever participate in that video. And it will be indistinguishable from the real, was it real or not? You won't be able to say that. So the technology is already there as of pretty much 2-3 months ago. And what that means is we're going to see a lot more essentially videos on the web, also TikTok and Insta, etc. By the way, there are already, by the way, these AI, what's called AI influencers. Essentially, you
Yeah.
think it's a person, but it's not a person. And then it has such a huge following, millions and millions of followers, and that AI influencer makes millions of dollars. But it's not a real person. And yeah, you can read about it later on if you're interested. But that's the world that we're moving into. That means videos will become more mainstream because more deepfakes will be out there. And because they'll be indistinguishable from humans, meaning they have a high quality, just generally, people will see sort of replies from the deepfakes, and as a result, they'll want to implement it in multiple place communication sort of channels, not just LinkedIn, but also maybe via email, etc. So these are my thoughts, I guess, on LinkedIn. Now on the TikTok front, so when we started the company, I found this very charismatic guy. His name is Simon, and Simon used to be this sort of, let's call it TikTok influencer. He's still an influencer on TikTok. And then I approached him because I always love to experiment with anything in my life. And one of the things I said, let's just do a bunch of videos on TikTok and see how that's gonna go. So he was going, doing a lot of videos on TikTok. And then we were trying to figure out whether we're actually getting any return from that or not. And if the answer is yes, let's keep on doing. If the answer is no, let's just stop it. And I think we did it for like up to half a year. And I can honestly tell you, we only generated like one lead. And so we run a bunch of different tests trying to figure out, works, what doesn't. And we're just not able to click. And that's because the assumption here is that our ideal buyers, they're not on TikTok. So the way that we approach, for example, TikTok even though it's a humongous platform, right, has a lot of potential, is the problem is the timing. So TikTok is not good when we started like 2 years ago. But I think it will become good in about 3 to 5 years. It will be essentially a lot more friendly towards the world of B2B, let's call it that way, because TikTok is like B2C, more of
Yeah.
that.
Interesting. The final question to wrap everything up, and it's a question that I ask every single guest who comes on, and it's if you were back at being 25, what piece of advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
25-year-old self. I would probably say, start a company sooner because, I started the company essentially when I was 33, which means about 3 years ago. I would say start a company sooner. I think when you're working for some interesting companies, like back in the days I used to work for Google and other interesting companies, you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. Let me learn more and more and more. And then you don't like you don't see yourself, going out of this sort of comfort of working for a big company, getting a big paycheck, a lot of commission, et cetera, like that. You don't want to leave that and, becoming poor and starting a company, right? The thing is that back then, which means now 11 years ago, we did not have this stuff like large language models, chat GPT, AI.
Mm.
Essentially, the ability to build something exciting was not there 11 years ago, and it became
Mm.
exciting to start a company pretty much 3 years ago, which is why a lot of people have been starting companies right now, because you can do so much crazy stuff with AI, and it's just getting better and better and better. The first wave was the text wave, generating text. Second wave was voice. We use voice. We use voice AI agents in our business to do inbound calling on people that didn't buy from us, let's say. And now is the video wave that we're going into, right? Became really good. So you see this like, wow, this is so cool, right? You want to be part of it, you want to be one of the first companies that built something really cool in the space. And I think this excites a lot of founders right now out there, also to start companies, why they're exiting their big corporate jobs or even working for Google and Meta and whatever, right? And starting something on their own, because there's so many possibilities out there. And I bet there's still like a thousand things that nobody's thinking of, and you can still build $1 billion company. And that's because of all the tech that we have right now available. And yeah, my advice is, start tinkering, with things, and use tools like vibe coding platforms like Lovable, Replit, you name it. Start tinkering things, be curious, speak to potential customers. You'll figure out a problem, build a product, and things will pan out.
Awesome. That was really, really good advice. I always love that last question. I don't plan to stop it anytime soon. But yeah, so thank you so much, Frank. This is Frank Saunders, the CEO and the co-founder of Salesforge. And Frank, is there any place that people can find you, people can look at your company?
Frank Saunders on LinkedIn, the guy with the bacon emoji, bringing home the bacon. Otherwise, if you want to check out what we do, go to salesforge.ai and see what we're up to. And yeah, see you around.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Frank, and we're excited to have you back on soon.
Cheers, bye.